Good evening, and thank you so much for taking this time to join us on this very important night. Tonight is about exposing the deeds of darkness that began about 100 years ago with Margaret Sanger in New York City at the Plaza Hotel on November the 11th through the 13th, 1921, when she met with leaders there at the Plaza Hotel in New York City to cast a vision for a culture of death. My name is Justin Reeder. I'm the founder of Love Life. I'm a follower of Jesus first and foremost. I'm a businessman. I've been in business for 16 years, but I got exposed to this issue when other businessmen invited me out to our local abortion center to expose me to the reality of what's happening in our backyard, just as we want to expose you tonight to the reality of what's happening across America and even globally. When I came face to face with that reality, I had to ask myself, what will I do? And I'm going to ask you that at the end of tonight, but I can no longer just go on with my normal life. I've been doing business with a company right across the street from the abortion clinic for almost 10 years and didn't know anything about this reality in my city. And I'm thankful to the Lord that He gave us a vision to see the Church of Jesus Christ mobilized to create a culture of love and life that would result to an end to abortion and the orphan crisis. I'm joined by an amazing group of panelists. These are pro-life heroes. These are true followers of King Jesus here before you. I'm truly honored that I get to be here with you guys tonight, traveling from New York City, traveling from California, and all across the Carolinas as well. Thank you for your willingness to follow Jesus at whatever the cost. We're going to go down the line. I want you to know who is here with us tonight. We're going to start with Daniel Ritchie, all the way here at the very end. Daniel is a speaker, an author, a pro-life advocate from Raleigh, North Carolina. He's a husband to Heather and the father of 2 children. Daniel, thanks for being here tonight, man.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, next we have Veronica. Miss Veronica Carr, who's newly married. Veronica is a missionary with Love Life, serving here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you're going to get to hear more of her story later on tonight. Veronica, thanks for being here. We have Pastor John Amachukwu right here next to me. John is a Love Life ambassador and a national spokesperson with Love Life. He's also the first assistant to Bishop Wooden at Upper Room Church of God in Christ. He is the husband to Crystal and the father of 4 children. And again, you will get to hear from John later tonight as well. I'm going to jump to Miss Lisa Washington sitting right here next to me. Lisa is our Love Life New York City director. She was with us from the very beginning of when we launched Love Life in New York City. She has a powerful testimony that you guys will get to hear tonight as well. Next to her, we have Seth Gruber, who's a national pro-life speaker. He is also the host of the Unaborted podcast. And this guy is setting bushfires across the nation as he travels and speaks at churches about the issue of life and calling the church to action all the way from Southern California. Thank you, Seth, for being here. Next, we have Marco Santiago. Marco is the writer and the director of the Sanger Film Project that you guys are going to be watching later this evening with us. He is also the creative arts director for the church in New York City. He is newly married to Angie Santiago as well. Man, thank you so much for being here. Incredible gift and talent that you're going to see that he poured into making of these films. It's a 3-part film series that you are going to see tonight. Video 1 that we're about to show you is taking place in front of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, where this all started 100 years ago, again in 1921, where Sanger stood in front of that place or had a meeting in that building over 3 days, casting her vision for a culture of death in our city. Proverbs 14:12 says this, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death." Sanger believed that children were a burden, but God says that children are a blessing. I want us to roll this video as you can hear it from Sanger herself in her own words of the vision of a culture of death in our nation.
I note that you doubt it worthwhile to employ a full-time Negro physician. It seems to me, from my experience where I have been in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas, that while the colored Negroes have great respect for the white doctors, they can get closer to their own members and more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. They do not do this with the white people. And if we can train the Negro doctor at the clinic, he can go among them with enthusiasm and with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people. His work, in my opinion, should be entirely with the Negro profession and the nurses, hospital, social workers, as well as the county's white doctors. His success will depend upon his personality and his training by us. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Sincerely yours, Margaret Sanger.
That's Margaret Sanger, born in 1879 and died in 1966. Although she is a heroine to some, she's remembered as a devil by others. She is most notably remembered as the controversial founder of the birth control league, which we now call Planned Parenthood. It was her efforts that brought about her vision for a culture of death in our country. She's standing in front of the Plaza Hotel in New York City, where years ago in 1921, a 3-day conference was held with scientists, leaders, doctors, and researchers to discuss birth control, and history was made. Here at the world-renowned Plaza Hotel, historic steps were taken to birth what we now call Planned Parenthood, and the door to America killing millions of babies was opened. But have you ever wondered who was the woman who founded what we now call Planned Parenthood? Who was the woman behind the face of our modern-day abortion movement? Who was the woman who met with the wives of Ku Klux Klan members and propagated white supremacy? Who was the woman who was close friends with Nazi advisors? The Nazi regime itself admired her views on eugenics and sterilization. Do Americans truly know that through Planned Parenthood and organizations like it, they are helping to support her deadly views on abortion, population control, sterilization, prejudice, and eugenics? Darkness can only thrive where there is no light. So, let us shine light on Planned Parenthood and expose why they were founded and what their purpose is. What is the plan behind Planned Parenthood? Is it just coincidence that they have clinics in poverty-stricken neighborhoods that are predominantly of black and brown people? If Margaret Sanger were alive today, what would she have to say about modern-day birth control methods? Is her legacy still alive?
Would you look at this? It's still here. After all these years and so much has changed, but it's still here. I was fighting for a better nation and the banishment of disease and misery, poverty, delinquency, and crime. If we wish for our civilization to survive, we must eradicate these evils. Even now, we are confronted with the fact that poverty and large families go hand in hand. I am living proof of that. My parents had 11 of us. Did you know that my mother died because of my father? She was trapped and weak. I'll never regret what I said at my mother's funeral. Looking over her coffin, I looked right at him and I said, "Mother is dead because of having too many children. Had she not had so many children, she would have been healthier and wouldn't have died from tuberculosis. She is one of thousands, if not millions, of women whose blood demands justice, and I said that I would fight for them, and that's what I did." You're probably wondering who I was writing my letter to earlier. I was writing to help Dr. Gamble get over his hesitancy in hiring a black doctor. Because, let's face it, the black doctor is the one who can best communicate with the black community. And a black woman is more likely to trust a black doctor than she is a white doctor. But, and I stress but, the key is to educate the black doctor in what my Planned Parenthood believes in. Contraceptives and safe abortions for women, when needed, are key to what my Planned Parenthood believes in. I believe that birth control is nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of preventing the birth of defectives, or of those who will become defectives. Who are the unfit? The mentally unstable. Children with disabilities, children with Down syndrome, anyone with a defect. We see them more in poverty-stricken areas, and we need to stop them from procreating or having any more children that carry that defective DNA gene. All women need birth control assistance to weed out these unfortunates. And it's my Negro project that will help offer the birth control that these colored women need who don't have access to the essential birth control methods, such as abortion. By weeding out the unfit, we can prevent more defectives from being born. Remember, fit people give birth to fit people, and unfit people give birth to unfit people. Don't look at me like that. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. And instead of sitting around talking about it, I'm actually doing something about it. And what are you doing? That's right. Nothing.
Wow. Brothers and sisters, you just heard it from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, herself in her own words. Ephesians 5:11 says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather to expose them. We want to expose those roots tonight. I want to read one quote that you just heard there, and then I want to go to Pastor John and get your comments on this, brother. She said, we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is the man who can straighten that idea out if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Can you speak to that as being a pastor?
Yes, thank you so much. Matthew 13:25 says, while men slept, the enemy came in and sowed tares amongst the wheat. Right? We live in a society today where everyone's talking about being woke, right? Knowing what's going on, having your finger on the pulse of the culture. But what I see oftentimes amongst black leaders, and in particular in the black church, is that we are not woke, we are asleep.
Yeah.
And while we are sleeping, the enemy has crept in and really turned the culture on its head. Let me say this about Margaret Sanger. She wanted to exterminate the black race, all right? And she did not want the word to get out. Yeah. But the word is out.
That's right.
And what is the black church doing about this information? By and large, on Sunday mornings, on Wednesdays, on Thursdays, throughout the course of the week, you'll be hard-pressed to find a black preacher who's willing to speak up and talk about this issue. They won't even touch it with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. The NAACP, which was set forth for the advancement of colored people, they won't touch it. When you look at many of your black actors, many of your black civil rights leaders, all right, like Jesse Jackson, who in the 1980s called abortion black genocide. But today, he switched, all right? He flipped, he sold out on the community, and he wanted to run for president. So therefore, he wanted political power. He needed support from white liberals. So therefore, he sold out his own race, and he won't even talk about the issue of abortion. I despise the narrative in this culture as it relates to how they feel and think about the black community. White liberals don't know what's best for the black community. I believe that black people can think for ourselves.
That's right.
I believe this, that President Joe Biden got it wrong, although he received nearly 90% of black support. He got it wrong when he said that all black people were monolithic in comparison to Hispanics. I'm black. Lisa's black. But do we support that narrative? No. He said, you know what, if you're confused on who you're going to vote for, then you must not be black. So we have our blackness question. All right, I guess I'm a fake black man, right? Because I did not vote for a person who wants to support Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
The black community has become the cash cow for Planned Parenthood. It's become its darling, right? And they wanted to use the black minister to deal with the more rebellious members of the community. I want to raise my hand today and say that I'm a rebel.
Yeah, come
I'm
on.
a rebel
Come
for
on.
Christ.
Yeah, come on.
I'm a rebel for the
Yeah,
cross.
amen.
I'm
Yes. Powerful word. We're not talking about something that happened hundreds of years ago. We're talking about something that is happening today in our cities. While we still have our church services, we still have our prayer meetings, we still have our worship nights, and all those things are great. But if we're avoiding dealing with the greatest moral issue of our time, then God says, I hate it. Your hands are full of blood. That's what he says in Isaiah chapter 1. Go and read it. I encourage you to read that chapter. It's exactly what the church was doing in that time when they were sacrificing children in the valley of Ben Hinnom. They still were having great prayer nights, having great worship nights. They were playing church really well while children were being murdered right next door. And we have treated this too casually for too long. It's time for the church to rise up. And that's what tonight is about. We're exposing the deeds of darkness, but we also are calling the church to take action in our cities. We're going to go to video number 2. This video was shot in front of Margaret Sanger's home in Lower Manhattan in New York City. And you're going to hear again from her own words what she believed and what she wanted to issue into our culture. And you've heard it. It's happening. What she started 100 years ago is playing out in our cities today. Let's roll video number 2.
This is Margaret Sanger. Heralded by some as a champion to the women's liberation movement, she is the founder of Planned Parenthood, and sadly, her goal to advance the abortion agenda is still thriving in America today. But is abortion really only about a woman's reproductive rights? Is abortion really about helping women? Is it just a woman's issue and her rights? Is this truly health care?
Some things never change, do they? It seems like the same issues are here in this era like they were in mine. War, it's always war, no matter what way it is. The war always seems to be rearing its wicked head, but I believe we can stop that. Yes, I do believe that war can be eradicated if you can control the population, control the numbers, control the power. All these men playing with our wives and lives, they think the one with the toys wins. They think the nation with the biggest population wins. Well, it's time to flip the tables on these men. All these wars and fighting, no, that stops now. You won't tell me or any other woman what to do with our bodies, or how many children we can have. We are more than just baby makers. We have hopes and dreams. So many women just wasting away in their homes, popping out one after another. If she doesn't want the baby, she doesn't need to have it. Her body, her choice. Slavery was wrong, and we ended it. This is totally different. This is not slavery. The fetus isn't even alive yet. It has no rights. The baby belongs to the mother. She's already putting her life at risk carrying the baby, and she decides what happens with it. A woman is already putting her body at risk carrying the child, so she should be the one who can choose what to do with it. Don't try and twist my words. Look at what we have now. Uneducated, lazy, degenerates just having one baby after another. One after another, and not caring for them. They look to others, relatives, the government to feed them, take care of them, basically parent them. How can somebody do that knowing you're unfit to give your child a good life, and yet you still decide to have the child, knowing the environment it's going to grow up in? The stupidity. Is it desirable that the unhealthy, the unfit, the feeble members of the community propagate their kind and fill the world with their children? And what's even worse is knowing that your child is going to be born with a defect, and you still choose to burden the society. No. That's why we persuade the woman to early abort the child, and since it's the duty of every doctor to provide medical assistance and advise women when needed, we are covering more ground and having it be essential that the medical students watch, and hopefully mandatory that they perform abortions in order to graduate. If you say you're a doctor willing to provide medical assistance to a woman, you must know how to perform an abortion. Women's health and birth control are vital. I may have died, but it seems like my legacy is still alive. I know what history says about me, but what will it say about you?
Again, we heard it directly from Margaret Sanger herself, her plan for parenthood. And we see a quote in there that I want to reiterate. It says that Margaret Sanger wanted to prevent the risk of women dying during labor. On the surface, that seems good, but we must follow it up with the quote that we also just saw in that video, that women who have had an abortion are twice as likely to commit suicide. So the question is, does abortion really help women? We know it doesn't help the child. We know that the child is murdered, but what about the woman? So I want to ask a woman. I want to ask Lisa Washington, who has her own story in this. As you hear Margaret Sanger, as you hear what she wanted to accomplish, talk about how it has affected you in your life.
Regarding my own story, just quickly, as you heard, I'm the youngest of 9. And there is a 20-year age difference between me and my oldest sibling. And my mom's marriage to my dad was difficult. And the reality is that she did not want, and she didn't intend to have a lot of children. As I said, she used contraception. Contraception failed because God had a different plan for me and my siblings. And the reality is that, again, God in his sovereignty and his providence and his goodness to me is that I was conceived and born right before abortion on demand happened in New York City. And so I realized as I was growing up, because my mom actually talked to me about some of these things. She didn't tell me these things to be hurtful or cruel. She was just talking to me as a woman. Yes, I was very young and really looking back too young to really know these deep intricacies of my parents' marriage and the complexities of what she was going through as an adult woman. But she was just sharing honestly, and I don't fault her for that. But I do realize that if I had been conceived any later than what I was, the reality is, Justin, I might not be here.
Wow.
And no one would have denied her. She already had 8 children. She'd been having children over 20 years of her life. No one would have denied her that right to have aborted me. But again, God had other plans. But the complexity of being conceived and being born into a situation like this, knowing this as a little girl, it caused me a lot of insecurities. And in my insecurities and my brokenness, I started looking for love in all the wrong places, like a lot of young women do. And a part of that broken path meant sexually immoral relationships. And I found myself as a teenage girl, pregnant, in high school, and beginning to think about now, oh my God, now I have to make a choice. I have to make a decision. And what is so heartbreaking about my decision to ultimately abort is that the very my mother couldn't do to me is now the very thing that I ended up doing to my own child. One of the ways that God's grace was made manifest to me is that my second oldest sister became a Christian. She prayed for me for 9 years. She invited me to church one night, and I had an absolute life-altering encounter with Jesus Christ, never ever to be the same.
Yeah.
And I remember when I went forward to that altar, Jesus told me that if I gave him that broken life, he would give me a new one in return. And and that began the healing, that began the restoration, that began the deliverance. And it happened over a long period of time. You know, you don't lay down and yield your body as an instrument of murder and death and think you get up off that table the same. And again, this played out over 48 hours. So it was deeply, deeply spiritual, very physically intense. I don't have time to get into all the depths of it, but it was such an incredibly traumatic experience. It left me a shell of myself. There is mercy, there is grace, there is forgiveness, but you've got to be convicted and you've got to turn from that regenerate thinking and begin to agree with what God says.
That's right. If you're in Christ, you don't identify as someone who's post-abortive. You're not a post-abortive woman or man. You are a new creation. You are a child of the King. And I just want to, again, encourage those maybe who are hearing this, maybe you've had an abortion in your past. We want to connect you to post-abortive biblical healing and restoration studies in your city. You can go to lovelife.org/restoredlife, lovelife.org/restoredlife. We would love to connect you in your city, confidentially, wherever you are, to a post-abortive healing Bible study so that you can find that same freedom that Lisa is now walking in. Marco, I want to go to you, brother. I know that you have communicated about this in the past. You have a burden about this issue as a man. Would you just talk about that, about how God is calling for men to rise up?
Yeah, definitely. I more so have seen this from an angle when I get involved in churches, and a lot of times now the issue of abortion is being mentioned by the pastors. We want to talk about the issue. We don't know how to talk about it with the churches. And it's prevalent. A lot of times, like you said, you were in the building and it was in the community, it's in the cities. It's in our churches.
That's right.
It's right here at home, and we don't realize that it's there because we haven't talked about it. We'll talk about taxes, we'll talk about politics, but when it comes to this, it's under the rug. And like Lisa shared, like we all know, I mean, a woman doesn't get, there's no immaculate conceptions. There's a man and a woman, and that's how God created it. It's marriage, it's a gift, it's a blessing. But what we've done is what we've done from the beginning. Adam said, it's not me, it's her. We've taken the blame as men, and we now are passing it on. It's not our issue at all. It's women. Yeah. And then when we go to the women, we're as Adam, as descendants of Adam, we are actually leaving our women, our wives, our daughters, our sisters alone once again to stand in front of God and say, we're not going to cover you, although we were called to be a covering.
That's right.
We're not going to protect you, although we were called to protect you. Everything that God blessed, that he equipped Adam to do, and now us as sons of Adam have that mantle, we are actually running away from it, and we don't want to stand up and now take responsibility for our actions. So now it's a woman's issue. Her body, her choice. No, it's been our issue from the beginning. We've just decided to run away. And so when God literally right now in society, he's saying, men, sons of Adam, where are you? And we're hiding. We're hiding in the bush. We're hiding in our businesses. We're hiding behind work. We're like, oh, and then when our wives come, girlfriends come, whatever, they come and they say, hey, I'm pregnant. Hey, I have a child. What should I do? Is basically saying, what are we going to do? And what do we say? Go take care of it. Here's some money, go to the clinic, whatever it is. And it's happening right here. And it's not in our it's not in our backyard. It's in the church.
That's right.
And I love how Lisa shared Paul. He wrote so much, but the scales fell from his eyes. He had to have that moment where the scales came down. And when they came down, just that encounter with Jesus, everything became about the cross. And now he was able to walk. Now he didn't care if he lost his life. I'm going to lose it anyways because I am going to die, but what am I going to live for? And we're talking about life now, just the sanctity of life and image bearer of God, image bearer of God, image bearer of God. We are God image bearers. We represent God to the world, but now we're so busy trying to look like the world doesn't know what God looks like anymore because the world is in the church. And God's saying, stand up, do something. And I love just sharing that. And I do use drama, films and media just to share that. But when I get involved in a project, it hits me in a whole nother way. And there's a deeper root. And God really, he's saying, Marco, what are you doing? So like, praise God, I was just married in January. And it just hits me with my wife. And I'm like, I'm going to be a dad soon. You know what I mean? I'm going to have children. And the responsibility is a weighty mantle. But God never, ever leaves us alone without the strength to stand under the mantle, to carry it. And we're not meant to do it alone. Like men think that we're supposed to just be these macho, whatever it is that the world tells us to do, but you have a helpmeet. You have family. You have the church body. So like you said, expose the deeds of darkness. And that's what we need to do, shed the light, because right now, it is a cancer that's just going through our churches, and we see the casualties, but we're too afraid to walk in the anointing that God has blessed us with to shed the light, to bring the healing. And it won't happen one miraculous day and then you're done, you're healed. No, this is a process, and it's meant to be a process because that's how I can walk beside. I can walk beside my brother. I can walk beside my sister. And that's what I love that Love Life does. When we were filming, you'll see it. When we were filming one of the videos, I didn't know this, but Lisa shared, and she said, you see that girl? She has a plastic bag in her hand. I don't know what a plastic bag meant. And that just meant that she actually had the procedure done. That was her belongings in there. And I know we were filming, but it hit me in such a crazy wave. And I was like, God, how come I'm just every Saturday, whenever, Wednesday, whatever weekend, I'm just watching TV. I'm basically living my life. And I think we're supposed to, but what are we doing with our lives? So sorry, I digress. Go back to just men, we are supposed to stand up. And if you don't know how to, just first take the first step. Come out to, a Love Life prayer walk. Raise your hand. God doesn't say come with all the answers. He is the answer. So he just needs a willing heart.
Amen. Amen. And he's looking for men that are willing to rise up. The majority of women that we counsel in front of abortion clinics say they never even would have considered an abortion, never even would have thought about it, if the father of the child had simply just said, hey, I'm with you. I know this is an unplanned pregnancy, but I'm with you, and we'll figure this thing out. It's time for men to rise up, to be protectors of women and children. Seth, you are national pro-life speaker. I'm sure you get asked this all the time. Why are